many of you have hiked to the peak of Mount Charleston? How did you feel when you got to the top?
Thirsty.
Pretty amazing, right, up there. Incredible view. Well, my hiking partner calls me and tells me we're going to take the direct route. So not the normal route that you would take to Mount Charleston. Now we set out 6 a.m. on July 3rd, this past July 3rd. Well, my history hiking at Mount Charleston first came from Questball back in March, where I did this mini amazing race with Amanda Ayers. It took place over 24 hours. We got this list of tasks that we had to complete, and we set off on this really a life-changing adventure. We're looking forward to doing it again in September and then again in November, San Diego and Phoenix. However, this was my first experience of hiking up at Mount Charleston. For Questball, we had to hike Mary Jane Falls in the snow. So we get there at the crack of dawn, start heading up the trail. The snow's still blowing. There's spots that's up to my knees as we're heading up these switchbacks. As we come back down, it was blowing so hard we couldn't even see our tracks in the snow. But that was one of the highlights of the whole adventure, the whole 24 hours. I think Mary Jane Falls was my favorite. Now this adventure on up to Mount Charleston was a little bit different. Instead of going to Mary Jane Falls, we headed towards Big Falls. Big Falls, same route on the way up, and then it splits off and you go in different directions. Big Falls itself is already a pretty good hike. If you've not been there, I highly, highly recommend you checking it out. Once you get up there, there's a beautiful flat spot to have a picnic at the base of the falls. After the falls, we made our way up and around Big Falls to the Meadow campsite. This campsite had amazing energy. I cannot wait to go back there and camp out. And I think it's going to be the perfect training for my mom and I for her PCT adventure. That's the Pacific Coast Trail she wants to do when she turns 65. We're going to spend a month hiking the Pacific Coast Trail. So leading up until then, we got to train. And I think this is going to be a perfect spot. After leaving the campsite, now we're going to head up towards the plane crash. Of course, this is my hiking buddy here, who's a little bit different from our Joe Navas, which we heard from Tom Baroni last week, that likes to talk to every single hiker on the trail. My buddy Joe likes to talk to absolutely no one. Zero. You know, I think because he is ex-Army Special Forces, we'll just leave his identity a secret. A top secret, that is. Speaking of our top secret, we made it to the plane crash next. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the story behind that. In 1955, a C-54 that was on a secret mission to go fly a U-2 spy plane crashed as it just barely clipped the top of Charleston Peak. And here's one of the engines from that. Next, you see one of the propeller blades. And I found this great article when researching for this speech to learn more about this crash that I'd seen. And they built a memorial at Mount Charleston that has the other propeller mounted. Has anybody here been to that memorial? I have not either. So after researching that, I really think I want to go check that out. After the plane crash, it was time to make the final ascent up to Mount Charleston, to the peak. And it was pretty grueling. So there wasn't a lot of pictures taken in this portion of time. It was about climbing and huffing and puffing and then getting to the scree. I don't know if you guys know what scree is, but every single step you take moves away from your feet. So the scree had me screaming and cursing. I will admit that I was using the F word fairly frequently here. But there was one shining light. These beautiful trees. The one you see laying on its side here, the bristlecone pine. I had been searching for these things since Questball. That was actually one of our tasks on our list, is to get a picture with a bristlecone pine. Well, if you know anything about bristlecones, they only grow up around the tree line at 10,000 feet. So that was a pretty impossible task. We didn't accomplish that one on our mission. These trees have such amazing energy. They just kept me driving up that hill. And then when I saw this one, picture perfect, right? Also, very convenient rest stop. So I stood here, and I think that's a pretty fitting picture there for a queen as myself, hiking up the mountain. Aha, finally we found the trail, thank goodness. So this whole time we've hiked off trail. This is him spotting the trail, just a few of the switchbacks from the top. So as you're making your way up to the peak of Mount Charleston, you know it's completely deserted of all plants, all trees, and there's several switchbacks. And we joined up right around that area. And then when I got to the top, hallelujah. I felt so grateful at that very moment to just live in this country, to be surrounded by this kind of beauty. I mean, it really gets me emotional, touches my heart. And I'm so grateful for the men and women that, you know, support and give their best for our freedom. Of course, here's my little pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the geographic marker. I always love finding these things. It feels like, you know, mission accomplished. But it was fairly windy up there, so I only took a quick picture, and then we found a nice little shaded, not shaded, but protected spot from the wind where we hung out for a little while, spoke to a lady that was actually coming up, back up there in a couple weeks for a potluck. Every year they have a potluck up at the top of Charleston Peak. I thought that was pretty intriguing. And so here we are getting ready to leave. Been there, done that, signed our name in the book, and I had to question to myself, was that really the direct route? 12 miles at 4,100 feet of elevation gain? I'm not sure that was the direct route. I'm curious to see what the normal route's like, but with so many mountains to climb, who knows what's next?